happy October once again, horror fans, and board now back with Rachel McDonald for our biggie of the month, our main event review for the month of October, our completely spoiler-filled review of Halloween Ends. So, yeah, our breakdown of the final movie in the modern Halloween trilogy by David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, and a few others. So, for the time being, at least, this will be the last Halloween movie. For the time being,
yeah.
Bad, and possibly the last Halloween movie to star Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode. Again, for the time being, never say never, because
exactly, yes.
And she could be tempted back in a few years if it feels right. But for the time being, this feels a bit of an end of an era. The big franchises we did, the sort of the top franchises when it comes to horror, was of course the Halloween franchise. We started it in something like August of 2021. And we wanted to get up to date for Halloween Kills last year, so we pretty much did that, where we got those movies done and ready for Halloween Kills. So now coming forward and sort of full circle to this October, where we've now gotten the final David Gordon Green of his Halloween trilogy. Regardless of what we actually think about the film, which we're about to get into, it does feel like a special review, personally, for me. And this is shaping up to be one of our most meaty reviews. It's a lot to talk about with this franchise, with the trilogy, because that's something we all reflect back on at the end, because it's important to consider these three films as a trilogy and talk about how well they work as a trilogy, as an overall story. The majority of the film takes place 4 years on from Halloween Kills. Laurie and Alison are now living together. They're picking up the pieces of their lives still, more so Laurie in a way, but Alison, there's obviously trauma because she lost her mum and the whole events of it. But Laurie decided to do her memoir, so State of Mind and her nostalgia. And Alison now is working for a living. She's got a job as a nurse. Used to this new character of Corey, and this is obviously he's involved in a big chunk of the main plot of this movie. So the movie opens with him babysitting this young boy. Tragic accident, and the boy ends up dead, and Corey is accused of his murder. So then you jump forward 3 or 4 years. How many years? I think it's 4. And he has gotten out, but there's still a lot of stigma attached to him, where people around the town still think, hey, this is the guy who killed that kid. Or there's stigma anyway, regardless of whether they think he did it on purpose or if it was like an accident type thing. So he has a very difficult life, but he essentially becomes a love interest for the Alison character, and it sort of leads to this very destructive, dark relationship where he ends up slowly becoming like a bit of a psycho, and that's the direction they've decided to go with his character. And the main bulk of this movie, where in a funny sort of way, he becomes the Michael Myers of the movie more than Michael Myers himself. How did you feel about Halloween Ends?
I kind of want to ask you how you felt first, because I'm really curious. Because I was watching this film and I was like, and often when I watch these films knowing that we're going to review it, I'll sit there thinking, okay, knowing what you know about Keith, do you think he'd like this? But I couldn't figure it out this time, and especially given how much you hated Halloween Kills. So I'm going to flip it around for a brief second. What did you think of this film?
Well, first of all, what I'm going to say is I've got 2 different drinks here. I've got, and maybe my choice of drink will answer the question, because I've got just what we call a lemsip or a hot lemon, which is just soothing and stuff, and then I've sort of got a bit of Holsten Pilsner left, so a bit of beers, and I mean, in a way, you know, beer is what you need to get through the Halloween franchise, because there's so many ups and downs, and you know, some films you enjoy, some you really don't enjoy, so it sort of represents. So I'm gonna take a sip of the beer. Okay, I'll put that down for the time being. So I think that answers it. I didn't like this film. I thought it was. Thank God. We're on the same page.
We are on the same page. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Screw
God.
This film.
I said to Stephen, I was like, if Heath likes this film after the way he trashed Kills, I will literally have to find a way to reach through the screen and throat punch him. So there was going to be violence. So I'm glad that we avoided that.
Cool. I think that would be a twist of fate, really. And the irony, I could have played that angle just to mess with you, but no. I mean, this review is already going to be long enough, so I won't play that game.
Obviously on the same page, because I came away from this film going, what the hell?
Fuck.
So yeah, we have a lot to talk about. What the hell happened with this final installment?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, we can dive in at the beginning in a minute. I mean, we're on the same page, basically, then it was a really terrible film. A really baffling film to end this, considering it is the end of the trilogy.
Yes.
That's the important point. And I think the only way to sum it up for me is then it didn't feel enough of a Halloween movie. And I think it's actually offensive I'm offended as a Halloween fan, some of the things they were doing and just how baffling it all was.
Yep.
And basically the worst damage is then they butchered the characters, and I don't mean butchered as in they die, but I just mean they butchered them. They sort of gutted them by making them a shell of their former self, because they did damage to Laurie.
Yep.
Probably mostly they did damage to Michael, because, as I said, it feels more like a cameo than he's like the big monster of this film. Corey pretty much sucks as a character.
He does.
Totally boring, and we'll get into the problems with him.
Yeah, we will.
But also the one that's really surprising and disappointed is Allison as well. I think they butchered her character in this film, and
absolutely
one of the problems with thinking about this and thinking back over this trilogy is it's bad enough if you say this doesn't feel like a Halloween movie, doesn't feel like enough of a Halloween movie, which I think we're both agreed on. But it's even more insulting if you can't even be consistent to what you've set up in your own trilogy.
Yes.
And that right there is the problem, because watching Allison in this movie, I don't feel like it's the same person they've set her up to be over the course of this trilogy.
I agree.
And I don't feel Laurie's the same person that we know her to be. I mean, obviously not just in this trilogy, but over the lifespan. I mean, it's very unique, because like she's now a 60-something-year-old woman, and back in 78 in the first movie she was only 19. So you know, she's now kind of grown up with this franchise and become like an elderly woman. Insult to what Halloween is, like the franchise in general, but it can't even stick to the continuity or consistency of its own trilogy, which should be a basic. Personally, it might be a toss-up, because obviously, as you know, I'm not as big on, well, I don't like kills, pretty much full stop, but but I'm going to say I think this was even worse, and one of the reasons it worse is then with kills, I mean, there's an argument that you do, obviously, as the title suggests, you do get plenty of kills, you get plenty of horror style moment, even though I think it's more action movie moments, which is one of my complaints. But whatever the case, you can, at least as a fan of the franchise, there is an argument to be made that, you know, there's plenty of that stuff in the movie, and that Michael obviously plays a really big part in the movie,
Yes.
as he should, because it is such a train wreck. And so many, because it's something the two films shares. There are really baffling moments in both. But the other thing about Kills is, and I would say this almost is true, but it doesn't quite get there. But with Kills, I think there are moments where it could become a bit of a guilty pleasure movie, because I think it is so all over the place at times. Whereas this, I kind of literally found it boring. Like there was bits of Kills I found boring, but I think I could see myself rewatching that and just enjoying how bad it is. Whereas with this, I don't think you have that. There might be the odd moment, but in general, not only was it just bad on pretty much every level, it was really a slog to sit through and watch. It was really, really boring.
Absolutely. And as we've talked about before, that's one of the cardinal sins of horror films. Well, any films really, but particularly horror films, is, at least, like you said, at least if the film is bad, you can enjoy, because it's so bad it's good, you know, or you can just enjoy that it's just a crappy film and you can laugh at the special effects, or you can laugh at the bad acting. But this, I'm with you. I was bored. I started like scrunching down in my seat halfway through the movie and like just being like, oh God, I've still got another hour of this to sit through. I'm completely agree with you that it does not feel like a Halloween movie. Like, even if you took it as separate from this trilogy and just put it as like a different like installment in the franchise, it still, to me, does not feel like a Halloween film. I remember sitting in the cinema for like the first 20 minutes of the film, just waiting for like that Halloween feel to like kick in, and it just never did. Even the credits, it's a small thing, but even the credits, like the blue that they used and the different font that they used, it was like, okay, that's odd. And definitely, as the concluding chapter of a trilogy, it was shit. Like, it did. Like, and we will talk about this more, but you know, I mean, I recently rewatched 2018 and Kills for the holiday season, and obviously I enjoy Kills much more than you do. I actually genuinely love parts of that movie. And the thing with those two movies is they feel connected. They feel like they're telling the same story, like they're focusing on the same characters, like they're building towards a conclusion. And then this third movie came in and didn't give us that conclusion. Instead, it just went in a completely different direction. And all of a sudden, we're focusing on this character that we don't care about. We don't know this character. We've never met this character. Why are we suddenly focusing on this character? We're definitely going to talk about this whole him taking on Michael's like evil and how they tried to make him the new Michael Myers.
There's so many problems
that
with
did not work. And we're definitely going to talk about what they did to our favorite horror movie villain in this movie, Allison. Oh my God, we're going to talk about Allison, because I don't know what they were smoking when they wrote her character in this one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to say, just because of, I like that actress a lot. I think she's very good. And obviously I'm not as high as you on the other two movies, but you know, she is good in those movies, more so in the first one because she gets more time in the first one. But you know, I've seen enough of her to know that she's a good actress, and generally I like the character outside of this movie. But it's a real shame, because like the performance is sort of a rare bright spot, because she's doing her best. Like, she is actually good in the movie. It's just unfortunate that what she's given is a load of shit, basically.
Yeah, it really is. It's just so crap. And Laurie's character, I can't. It's kind of like, you know, 2018 Laurie, right, is like this paranoid, tough Sarah Connor type character, and And I don't find it believable that in 4 years, with Michael still on the loose, she's somehow gone from like Sarah Connor to Martha Stewart. And it's like, I'm supposed to
Yeah.
believe. And I know Allison has like this little throwaway line about how she's like in therapy or something, but it's like, Laurie's got a lot of issues. You know, she lost her daughter, to this guy. She lost her friends to this guy. She was paranoid about him for 40 years. And yet somehow in 4 years' time, she's somehow gotten it together enough to be like this little cute granny who is carving pumpkins and making pumpkin pie for her daughter, her granddaughter. And
Yeah,
it didn't ring true for
absolutely.
me, like especially like if you watched Halloween 2018 and then immediately watched this one, it would be like you were watching two different characters. Like, I understand that maybe they wanted to give Laurie some closure and maybe give her some peace, but this was not the right movie to do it in.
The problem with Laurie in the movie sums up part of the problem with the movie and with the people making it is then the characters are so inconsistent and they just change on a whim. And it's almost like with Laurie, we see like 3 different Lauries in one movie and none of them really gel together because obviously it's a long time in coming, but we eventually get the sort of badass back, but the damage has already been done. And but we also get this ridiculous, cartoony American Pie style version of Laurie, which we'll get into more details, but some of her dialogue and some of the crass stuff she's saying is like just ridiculous and is no way consistent with the Laurie Strode we've seen in the movies in like this franchise. I could maybe see Jamie Lee Curtis saying that stuff maybe, but not Laurie Strode. That's the difference. So no, her character and the way it changes, and it's the thing with this movie, like people just change on a whim. They change their minds or their action changes. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the opening of the movie and the Corey stuff. First of all, the setup of that. Michael Week and almost sort of a cameo, almost a footnote in his own movie, I might add. I think it actually starts in the opening of the film because the opening of the film, the tone of it is all wrong because they start playing like rock and roll music. You get like a DJ's voice coming over the opening of it, and it just feels very jokey. And the opening to a Halloween movie shouldn't be jokey, not like a serious movie. I mean, if it was a more comedic one, then that's fair enough.
If it was Halloween Resurrection, then fine, yes, but it's
or
not.
Even H2O, because that's obviously one where they go for
the post-Scream era. Yeah, I agree, but not for this trilogy.
And I think that's part of the problem with these filmmakers is they sort of want their cake and eat it. They sort of want to say, well, this is a more grounded, back to basics Halloween movie. But then on the other hand, they want the cartoony, silly jokes, like the inappropriate jokes, the sort of like freshman humor style joke. And so it's like, I think that maybe sums up the movie quite well is on the one hand, you can't take it seriously as a serious drama. You have to do it well. And you have to make us believe in these characters and believe in the actual drama. They don't do that. But then it fails as a Halloween, slasher type movie as well. So it fails on both ends. But as I was saying, the opening sort of starts that off. It starts the theme of Michael becoming a sort of a joke, a side note in his own, because the DJ's making cracks about him. And I know obviously later on the DJ gets his and they reveal the DJ to be a complete asshole, but and we'll talk about that scene, but that sort of made his death actually quite predictable because I sort of guessed them. The scene with him, Allison, and Corey. As soon as he was like being like really inappropriate, I guess
you're like, okay, you're gonna die.
But the point of it is, it just sets the movie off on the wrong tone. A movie where it should be, yeah, this is a serious deal. Michael's going to be like a total killing machine again. He's like pure evil, all the rest of it. But when the DJ comes over and you've got this rock and roll music and he's just cracking jokes about, regardless of whether you want to say this is something someone might do, which you could stretch and say maybe, but at the same time, it just undercuts the threat that and the impact he's supposed to have around this town, because it's only 4 years later once again.
I know. I agree. I kind of like, I remember thinking that we go into this film with a very different Haddonfield, a Haddonfield that had been through this sort of trauma and violence and seen so many people taken down by this monster. So the fact that like 2019, like the flashback opening, the scene with the babysitter, it's literally only a year after all of these events, after your town went crazy and killed an innocent man, after a bunch of you were taken out in the street by this monster, after you saw the havoc he wreaked, and you're all just going about your business like it's just another normal Halloween. Like, that did not ring true to me at all. And I thought it was really lame, and it kind of sets up what they did with Michael in this movie, which was diminish him, which is just so crap.
Just sort of think if the opening scene of like the original movie had started with that sort of tone.
Oh my God.
Okay, like even if it recovered and it's a great movie and all the same, it still that would have been the wrong tone to start that original movie.
Absolutely.
Off. Instead, we've got one of the greatest opening scenes to any horror movie, maybe any movie ever. And in comparison, this just sets the wrong tone. Corey accident, where he accidentally kills this kid, because I mean, I was already starting to roll my eyes a little bit because of the rock and roll and that douchey DJ, but just the series of events that leads up to this kid accidentally being killed, I like cracking jokes back and forth.
Yeah.
But it was just a stupid end to the scene. Like,
it was
this massive coincidence that they just happened to come in.
Just as the kid fell over the
and he's
railing,
at the top of the stairs. It all lines up in a way that it just wouldn't. It's like too many coincidences. Do you agree?
Yeah. I do. And also for me, so the trailers to this movie gave nothing away, which on the one hand I do like, but on the other hand, now having seen the movie, I wish I'd been warned about what to expect. So when I went into this movie, I literally did not know what to expect. So I pulled it up on my phone, the little synopsis that my local movie theater had written. And the synopsis made it sound like basically they're like, Laurie's moved on, and then they're like, when a kid is accused of killing his babysitting charge, everything spirals out of control. So what I thought was going to happen is I thought that was going to be Michael returning. I thought Michael was going to come in, kill this kid, and that the babysitter would be left looking like he had killed the kid. So I actually, in the first scene, I was very confused. Well. Yeah, so I'm watching the first scene thinking, okay, Michael's here somewhere, and I'm watching for like clues that he might be hiding behind the door, or he might be, and then the kid just goes flying off the railing, and I was like, what just happened? Did Michael come flying out of somewhere and throw the kid off the railing? Steven's like, no, kid just fell off the railing. And so I thought that opening was so weak, and it didn't set anything up for the movie. And that's the other thing. Halloween openings, they need to set up things for the rest of the film. You know, the original opening shows us Michael's kill, his very first kill, showing us that he's evil. Even in 2018, the opening scene is the podcast is visiting Michael at the asylum. So we get reintroduced to Michael that way. Halloween Kills opens with, you know, the boyfriend finding the sheriff. So we see the sheriff is still alive. So all of these openings, they contribute to where the movie's going. This opening, I mean, it does, but we don't know that. You know, we don't know this character, and we don't know that this is where the film is going. So it just feels like a really underwhelming opening without a proper kill.
Solution for it. Michael should have been in the scene somehow.
Yeah.
He probably should have been the one who did the killing.
Yep.
But it was Corey who got, you know, kind of stitched up for it.
Yeah.
That would have fixed a lot of the problems with the scene.
I
the
think so,
main
yeah.
problem. And but even though I knew that, even though I'd read this and I sort of knew that him and Alison became a thing, I sort of still expected in the final movie of their trilogy, which then now saying this is, at least for the time being, this is the end. They make a big thing of that at the end of the movie. I still expected the three main characters to be Alison, Laurie, and of course Michael Myers.
Michael, yes.
You know, because I mean, in Kills, for all the things that I don't like about it, if there's one film in this trilogy where Laurie can take a bit of a backseat, in theory, it is that movie.
Yes.
You know, because they're going for a different sort of thing in the movie, and it actually makes sense to have kind of Laurie and Michael as a big thing in the first one, and then return to it at the end, and they can try and do something different in the middle. So I think for me, that's why I was probably expecting. I was still expecting a bad movie, obviously, because my vibe was less enthusiastic than yours based on Killed, it to be a bit better, because I sort of thought they've got an open goal here. They just have to do a return to the Laurie Michael feud and you know, involve Alison in it and make that the basis of the film. That is all they needed to do. So, I mean, even when I heard this Corey plot, and okay, he's a new character, I still thought that I never in my wildest mind thought that's going to be, in a way, the sort of main plot, and that Michael's going to be relegated to more of a supporting character.
Yeah, what the hell, man?
And I can't
Michael
believe
Myers
it. That's so idiotic.
Character. That's so insulting. It's so insulting. And I know that other movies in the franchise have, you know, treated Michael not fantastically. We have had some incarnations where, you know, he's not quite on his game. But I honestly think this movie is the biggest insult to his character. Like, he's Michael freaking Myers, man. He is legendary. He's the Shape. He's like, I mean, I've talked about this in many of our discussions about Halloween, and I'll reiterate it again. For me, a good Michael will elevate a film. It's why I love Kill so much, because I love Michael in there. So to take the thing I love most about these movies and the thing I come to these movies for, and to reduce him to what they reduce him to in this movie is so insulting. It's so insulting to the character, to the franchise, to everyone who loves the character. That being said, I did like the little Nick Castle cameo. That was one of the only things I liked in the movie, was that we actually got to see Nick Castle unmasked. So that was kind of funny.
So is he the last sort of bit at the end? Because I know it was someone else playing.
You see him. You see Nick Castle at the Halloween party that Alison takes Corey to, and he's like he's a party goer. He comes up to Corey briefly. I was like, oh my god, it's Nick Castle. So I liked that they.
And that's fair. That's was fair nice. Enough, because I mean, I'm a bit cynical about how this trilogy has used nostalgia. I think at times they've gone over the top with it, but that's just a nice little Easter egg. So that's I thought that was and it's fitting because he deserves to be here in some way.
He does, and I like the fact that they had him playing a different character, so we could actually see him, because obviously playing the Shape, he's always under the mask. So it was nice to see him just as Nick Castle. So that was cool. But no, Michael as a whole. No.
He got released 4 years later, because if he'd been sort of like fixed up and accused of the murder of a kid, wouldn't he get a longer sentence than 4? Is it just because they got evidence that then it wasn't him, or it was an accident?
I could be wrong, but I don't think he was found guilty. I think someone mentioned that he was acquitted at the trial. So they went to trial for manslaughter, and I think he was acquitted and found not guilty. So it sounds like he didn't actually serve any time. He was probably in jail for the duration of the trial, and then has probably been out for a couple of years after the trial. So I don't think he actually served any time. I think he was charged. There was a trial, but he must have had a good lawyer, or they proved that it really was an accident. And and I think he was acquitted. But I'm guessing the trial was, I mean, in a town like Haddonfield, a small town, the trial would have been well known, well publicized.
The bullies, but also with Alison and, well, particularly Laurie at first, because she's the one who comes to his defense.
Yeah.
And I think part of my issue with this is at the very least, this is a murky, shady character, at the very least. And my problem with this and the way Laurie is so defensive of this character, and bearing in mind she then goes the whole hog and sort of sets him up with her granddaughter, who she's meant to love film, but she can't be 100% sure this guy's innocent. I mean, I can see the theme they're going for. I can see how similar.
Yeah.
She can see certain things in him about herself when she would. But at the same time, there's no way she can be 100% sure that he's innocent at that point. And probably at the very least, because of some of the psychological damage he's gone through, she might actually think about that and might actually say, it's probably not best for my granddaughter to see this guy. Nothing malicious. I think he's probably innocent, but it's probably not the best.
And again, if you think about like Laurie from 2018, who was so paranoid about everyone, and suddenly she's okay with letting her granddaughter see some guy who has been accused of murder in the past. Like, again, it doesn't ring true for the character to be so. And I guess maybe that's what they were trying to go for here, because they are trying to move Laurie on and show that she's grown and changed, but doesn't really,
like most things in this film, it's not very convincing.
No, and especially when it's attached to the first two films, because you really have to remember this is supposed to be a trilogy. This isn't just another sequel. This isn't just another installment. This is literally supposed to be the concluding chapter of the trilogy. Yeah. And you just don't. Yeah. Then there's, I mean, if you want to talk about, so Laurie is completely out of character, but I also found it really odd how quickly Alison attached herself to this guy. You know, like she seemed to fall for him really quickly. And again, I mean, when you think about Alison, that poor girl lost her boyfriend, her best friend, her mother, and her father all in one night. You'd think that would make someone a little paranoid and a little bit more traumatized than she comes across. And I know they have a few instances where she talks about her trauma, and then there's that whole stupid, I want to burn it down, burn it. I mean, who knew that there was something worse than Evil Dies Tonight? I mean,
exactly.
But yeah, and then, you know, the fact that she gets attached to him so quickly, that she bonds with him so quickly, that all of a sudden she's considering running away with him after knowing him for like 10 minutes. It's like, you know, it's ridiculous.
So I have a phrase for this, and it's something I'm quite proud of, but I'm sort of calling it emo Romeo and Juliet, because that's kind of what it was. I'm not insulting Romeo and Juliet, but that's kind of, it feels like that combination. But that's the thing. I mean, how stupid I mean, to even have that sort of relationship, that sort of story in a Halloween movie, but to make it so unbelievable and contrived that you don't believe it. Like, you don't believe it for a minute. I mean, some of the faults in like Laurie's behavior and her actions and trying to set him up like this is like an episode of Happy Days or something, you know, I mean, some of that applies to Alison as well, and the way she's like taking him from him. Because one example of that is he says at one point, and it's when they've already started seeing each other, but he comes to her and he's honest and says, I just killed someone.
Yeah.
And in the next instance, like, she doesn't pull away from him. She's not, okay. Like, she's not sitting him down and saying, well, what happened?
Well, what's going on? Yeah.
Exactly, as most people would if they haven't, like, run a mile. But she actually starts holding his hands and they embrace, and it becomes all romantic. And it's like, what planet are these characters on? And obviously, if it was a different sort of character, you might have believed it. But this is Allison, the Allison that has been set up from the first of these 3 movies. You know, it's totally inconsistent. Like, she wouldn't have changed this month. This much. In 4 years. You know,
it's ridiculous.
Because at this point, I'm guessing she's meant to be at least 21, 22.
Yeah, she'd be about 21, 22. I would say, because she was 17, 18 in the first movie. She was a senior, I'm pretty sure.
And she was already sort of reasonably mature enough for her sort of age.
She was a smart girl. And you see her in Halloween 2018, right? And she's not taking any shit from her boyfriend. She's not taking any shit from the guy who tries to hit on her afterwards. You know, in Kills, she's determined to go after Michael. She trusts her instinct. She knows, you know, she's smart. She's alert. In this movie, she literally has a murderer right in front of her, and the girl doesn't suspect a thing. She doesn't blink. Nothing about her. It's like, when did she get so dumb? It's just such a
dumb, naive, and just
being led around by her lady parts.
Because I mean, one of the things I jotted down, I think, was just something where they're just forcing this too much, because similar to what I said about Laurie, I sort of thought then at the very least she would be cautious, but I could sort of see her being nice to Corey just because she thinks the same as the mother, not the mother, the grandmother, then he's innocent and sympathetic to, like, but no, I mean, that was a stretch already, but then as soon as he admits to her, I killed someone, and as soon as he's acting like increasingly more of a sort of a wacko type thing,
being all dodgy and stuff,
at least questionable.
And the guy who played Corey really had chemistry either. Like, maybe if they'd had good chemistry, you could have believed that, yes, she's going to run off with this guy. But like, personally for me, I did not feel any chemistry between the two of them. Their scenes for me just were awkward, and I wasn't feeling it.
And I hated the whole storyline. I hated that it took up so much of the film, that it bogged it down. Obviously, there was room to maybe do it a little bit and have it as a subplot, but then obviously you need to do it well. You need to convince that she really loves him, which I didn't, and that's part of the problem, because it's so contrived, it's so forced. He was really boring, especially in that first, because he's the sort of actor and character where when he became a psychopath, I thought, well, in a way that's about right. He comes off as that sort, even though I didn't buy it because it's in this movie where it's so badly written.
But he has the look that he can play.
He's that.
If written
but the problem is, for so much of the movie, we have to stomach he's this brooding loner, he's so misunderstood, and the actor just couldn't pull it off. The actor was pretty bad. He couldn't
pull it off. I don't want to feel sorry for a murderer. I mean, I don't watch Michael Myers going, oh, you poor thing, no one loved you when you were a child. Like, that's just not the story I want to see. Plus, I also found his whole descent into, like, evil really unbelievable. Like, the dude went from, like, 0 to murder so quickly. Like, what the hell? And it was just not believable. I don't understand. Okay, so help me out here. So the dude goes down into the sewers, where apparently Michael's been living like a hobo for the last 4 years. I mean, sure, let's just assume he's just been down there for 4 years.
Because someone else mentioned it doesn't make sense that he would still be down there.
No,
and he would still be weak, because that's how they portray him, that he's still weak.
But it's been 4 years. I know he took a lot of damage in Halloween Kills, but it's still been 4 years, you know, so...
But again, this is more kind of gutting Michael as a character, because he is such a big force, and we know him as the Shape and the rest of it, then by now he should have recovered.
And we'll get into this a little bit more later once we do talk about like the final climax, but also Kills like was very much setting up this idea of Michael being something other than human, you know, and there was this whole thing of Laurie saying, you know, maybe it has to be me who kills him, maybe he gets stronger with every kill, and they were building him up to be a bit more larger than life. And then in this movie they just completely threw that out and just went, no, he's just an old man. He's an old man hanging out in the sewers, and that's all there is to it. But okay, so going back to my original point. So Corey gets dragged into the sewers by Michael, who even knows why. And sorry?
No, yeah. It's all right. Just before we move, because another coincidence that I sort of hated in the movie involving Corey is I hated that he just happened to bump into the mother of the child
I know that
at
was
the Halloween
contrived.
party. How unlikely is that?
I know, especially because it was like a Halloween party for like younger people. What's this like middle-aged woman doing, just sitting there, just like did she just plant herself there? Yeah, no, I agree. That was another thing. But yeah, so
there's no real way of her knowing that he would be there, so you can't even say that. So. Terrible.
But Michael drags this dude into the sewers, right? Doesn't kill him because he just doesn't, which again makes no sense. So am I supposed to believe that, like, because there's that part where like Corey wakes up and Michael grabs him by the throat and they're like staring into each other's eyes. So am I supposed to believe that like through this interaction, Michael somehow like sent him like murder vibes or something? Like, is that what I'm supposed to be picking up? I didn't get it. I didn't quite understand what was going on there. Like, it was just weird.
No, it was baffling. It was like contrived, and the whole thing that's so wrong and ridiculous about this whole plot is that it's not credible that Michael would train someone, or then he would have like an apprentice. However you want to just believe that he's been there for 4 years and still hasn't recovered, to make us believe that then he wouldn't just kill this worthless piece of garbage Corey. Like basically as soon as he got in his face, he would have killed him. That's 100%. The Michael Myers we know.
Yeah.
So the whole thing's contrived. So I don't buy that he would have an apprentice.
Michael Myers apprentice.
I know, but that's sort of the first term I thought of, really. And then the way they force feed us this idea of Corey becoming a psychopath.
Yeah.
And this movie's version of Michael Myers. It happens so quickly. It happens
so quickly. He just escalates.
You know, maybe if you did a HBO style TV series, you could maybe make it convincing over the course of 10 episodes, but you can't make it convincing in whatever it takes up, like half an hour, 40 minutes in this movie.
Yeah, and it really does, because in Laurie, you mentioned Laurie's memoirs, and so we hear some of the voiceover.
I don't like that either.
No, I don't like it either. But you do. No, I thought it was unnecessary. Voiceovers in films, they have to be used very carefully and in a way that actually adds to the film, whereas I didn't think this added really anything to the film other than to try to convince us that Laurie had moved on, which I wasn't buying. But she does have a line about letting evil inside, or evil coming inside and opening yourself up to evil. So I think we were supposed to buy that, like, Michael is like passing his evil on to Corey and Corey's going to be the new boogeyman, but it was just executed so badly and in such an unbelievable way. And can I just say, the kills in this movie were so underwhelming. Like, I thought all of the kills were so, like, especially coming off Halloween Kills, which was so violent and so intense and had so many, like, and even 2018 had like a lot of really fun kills. I just found the kills in this just a big step down. And I do think it was because they were committed by Corey, not by Michael. So we didn't get, you know, the typical Michael Myers, you know, kills. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's that, and it's probably also just the fact that they rush through them so quickly because, like, I was sort of tapping out of the film, and I was questioning if we're actually going to get, you know, a decent amount of kill scenes, a decent amount of horror scenes. Because I think it's at least over halfway into the movie before that stuff starts to happen.
Yeah.
And obviously it is a big problem, the fact that it's Corey, and we're meant to sort of stomach that. But yeah, you hit on something there, because realistically, and we can talk about maybe the future at the end of this video, but realistically, if you wanted to move away from Michael, or if you wanted a different Michael, bearing in mind, you know, Nick Castle is getting on himself, and how many more times can they resurrect this character and still make him amazing sort of thing, which he was originally, then, you know, you think for future movies, you could actually do this sort of idea, and you could sort of do it.
It's not a bad idea in theory. Bad execution.
Yeah, terrible execution, wrong actor, and wrong, the writing and the direction just wasn't there. But it's a similar thing to how I feel about Allison. I think the next logical step would be to keep Allison on for whenever the next movie is. She becomes the new Laurie. That's the way. That makes sense. So we were talking about the cop character who you pointed out was Allison's ex, which
he was a creeper. What the hell?
He was, but my question about him is it me, or did he come across as, again, way too old for Allison? He looked to me to be at least late 30s, early 40s.
Absolutely,
which, considering
agree.
She's only like 21, 22 at the most. So, once again, what the fuck movie? I mean, okay, if you want to play it as he's got a thing for her and he's being too aggressive, then fine, do that. You can say, like, he's just a scumbag, that sort of thing. But don't try and convince us that they actually had a relationship and that she was actually, you know, part of that. She wanted to be with... No. But yeah, it just stood out. I thought, is this guy meant to be younger than he looks? I mean, if that's the case, they chose the wrong actor, because this actor is, I would say, at the youngest, late 30s.
Oh, definitely.
Sort of look like it could be early 40s.
So, no, because when we first pulled her over, I thought he was just a creepy older cop. But then, later on they mentioned, that cop that you dated. And I was like, what? The dude who looks like he's like 15 years older than her? I mean, Allison, honey, I know you got issues, but come on. Oh, yeah, no, I was very glad when he died. Although his death, again, very underwhelming. I mean, it's that whole thing.
We had more melodrama. Obviously, the stuff in the diner was so over the top.
Oh, it was so contrived, and just so, again, it just didn't feel organic or believable. And then him taking the cop down to the sewers so that he and Michael can kill him together as a tag team. It's like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, I've seen it described as that online, like a tag team style thing, and it was that was crap.
That was crap. But do you know what was even crapper? Let's talk about the scene where Michael Myers is literally wrestling a teenager for his mask. Like what the hell was that scene where they're like fighting down in the tunnels and they're like literally, I actually started laughing out loud in the cinema in that scene. I think
is that one of the bullies? You'll have to remind me.
No. This is the scene where this is like after, I can't remember whereabouts in the movie it is. I think it might be just before he kills the teens. He goes down into the sewer and he and Michael have like a full-on wrestling fight over the mask where they're like it's filmed from a distance and you see them like wrestling. Like Steven said, it reminded him of like a Simpsons episode where like Homer is wrestling someone else. And I'm just like, you've reduced Michael Myers to like this loser who wrestles teenage kids down, not teenage, I mean Corey's like 21, but who wrestles like some loser kid down in the sewer and loses his mask. Like, come on, that is so
it's not
insulting.
Because this is another indictment of how all over the place and rubbish this movie is. Like, there's whole scenes that we're struggling to remember.
He's killed the DJ. That's right, because he goes to the station, remember, wearing the Michael Myers mask, which so insulting.
We have to talk about this.
He put that mask on and I was like, oh, you motherfucker.
No way, Phil. You've already crossed many lines, but that might be the biggest line you've crossed.
Yep.
It's certainly up there.
You're giving me there's this meme that goes around, which is like, you know, Chanel versus Walmart. So like Michael Myers is Chanel, and then this dude is like Walmart Michael Myers. I'm like, what the hell, man? And I was even making fun of the way he walks. I'm like, look at him. He can't even get the walk down. He's like, you know, strutting around and just, what an insult.
I think they might as well have got Busta Rhymes back, and then he could have.
I actually said that.
Oh, that's funny. That's so funny. Yeah, put him under the mask. You know, he could have been.
Yeah, when they were wrestling in the sewers, I was like, now all we need is Busta Rhymes to come on through and be like, trick or treat, motherfucker. It was just getting to that level of ridiculousness. Just so and so. Okay, the biggest mistakes and just the worst things about Corey was what happened to him at the end of the movie. You know, we spend this whole movie with this new dude, with this dude that we think is going to be built up to being the next Michael Myers, or he's going to go on to be like a serial killer and everything. And then he just stabs himself in the fucking What the hell? It was like, it just made the entire movie completely redundant. Because it just went nowhere. And then
was it? See, I can't. Was it a basic suicide in the end? Like he
was.
It was in the struggle.
Yeah, well, no, he came to kill Laurie. Laurie tricks him into thinking that she's committed suicide, and then they have a whole big fight. And she's like, "I won't let you have Allison." And then he's like, "Well, if I can't have her," and then he stabs himself in the neck. And then Laurie picks up the idiot ball and decides to pull the knife out of his neck because that's a good idea. And of course, Allison, again, a contrived coincidence, Allison walks in at that very moment and is all like, how could you kill him, Grandma? It's like, girl, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Situation.
And you should have some faith that if she's killed him, which obviously she hasn't, but there's a good reason for it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because she's given this weirdo douchebag plenty of chances over the course of this movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, just first of all, what's the idiot ball? What's that referring to?
So it's a trope. So it's basically, it's basically what it sounds like. Like someone's been passed the idiot ball, so you're holding the ball that makes you really stupid. You know, so yeah, like a basketball game. Like let's just pass the idiot ball around.
That's a good.
So Laurie and Allison, they both pick up the idiot ball so hard in this movie. like they're just throwing it back and forth between the two of them. And that ending, I mean, I'm guessing you weren't impressed with it either when he suddenly just, you know, and then like that's it. Everything we've been building in this film, that's where it ends.
Yeah, no, it was so anticlimactic. Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you said. Because another small point on that scene, and I think we'll circle round back to it in a minute, but another small point is because I was in the mindset that this would be about Laurie versus Michael with Allison involved as well.
Yeah.
Then when I saw that stuff in the trailer, like what we saw of it, when she does the fake out with the pumpkin, I sort of assumed that she thought it was Michael. I mean, obviously, in a way, it makes sense that she thinks it's Corey, knows it's Corey, because he's the one who's been going around as Michael Myers. But yeah, but I think that just sums up one of the problems, that really this is now the final part of this trilogy, and it should be all about that stuff. So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought that was really weak stuff, really anticlimactic and lame, and a stupid sort of payoff to what is a really stupid storyline anyway. Just talking a little bit more about the mask stuff, because some of that stuff and the way he comes to find them and just put them up, it it's so stupid because it starts off with him and like a Halloween, like just a regular Halloween
a clown mask,
costume.
yeah,
Clown, exactly. And
yeah,
I just hate the fact that he starts off with that, and that's sort of like at first his answer to
yeah,
the idea that then if he's gonna be a killer, he needs a mask, and then he just Michael is once again sidelined, which is a joke. And Corey just decided to pick up the mask, and it's so eye-rolling, it's so bad.
It is.
And like you said, it is offensive because that mask, that William Shatner mask, and people, it's easy to forget that they actually had that idea.
I know.
It looks like William Shatner's face. So that's a great little detail. But yeah. It's so insulting. That mask should always be worn by Michael Myers.
By Michael Myers. I was pissed off enough when that stupid doctor put it on in in Halloween 2018. I was like, you stupid Loomis knockoff, get that mask off your face. But at least in that regard, like it was supposed to be insulting. It was supposed to show that this doctor didn't understand the mask and didn't understand Michael and thought that by putting the mask on, he could understand Michael. So at least there was kind of a point to that. But no, seriously, this dude put on the mask and I was like, oh, you get the fuck off my screen.
Yeah.
Like, don't you do Michael dirty that way. Like, just.
So everything about that mask stuff and everything about what happened sort of with Corey at the end is really bad. Another thing about the Laurie stuff, and it's just to do with, again, a lack of logic and stuff, is part of my problem with that is once again, it's a bit like nostalgia overkill. It's them finding excuses to reference back to 78.
Yeah.
And the other stuff is, I just don't buy that Laurie would think it's a good idea, then it's a good way to move on from this stuff 4 years later. Like, I can understand the theme of the best ways to confront this, but the way she does that at her best is then she's just Laurie Strode. She's like, as you said earlier, a Sarah Connor type character. That's the way you confront it. You don't really write a memoir which is going to bring all this stuff up, because obviously at this point they're not really sure if Michael is still around, out there.
Yeah.
Like, obviously they suspect he might be because it's only 4 years later, but they can't be sure of that. They don't know where he is. I mean, he might have moved on, but at this point, 4 years on, you're not really you should be like moving on with your life. You don't. So the memoir as an idea, as a concept, was just a no-go.
No, I didn't like it either. I thought it was too neat. It looked like Laurie was moving on too quickly. Like I said earlier, if the woman was that paranoid in 2018 when Michael was locked up in an asylum, we're supposed to believe that with him out there on the loose, she'd somehow just turn into like household Martha Stewart and like forget all of her training and forget. I wish. Like they even could have made it a little bit better by showing maybe showing that she had guns hidden under her bed, or maybe she has like a secret locker somewhere where she has stuff. Like it would have been better if we'd seen that, like maybe if she'd moved on, but she's still prepared, she still has some of that survivalist stuff. She still has some of that Sarah Connor. Like we could have had a scene where she opens a cupboard and there's like, an arsenal there. Like, she's presenting this Betty Crocker type house, but she's actually still like Sarah Connor, but they don't do that. Instead, they just ask us to believe that she's just moved on, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, that actually could have been a good way to do it, because you could have played with it and said she's fighting with that side of herself. It's like a struggle between the two sides.
Yeah, and then Allison's confrontation with her would have had a bit more weight, when Allison says, oh, you pretend to move on, but you haven't. It's like if we'd seen, proof that of what Allison was saying, that would ring more true, and then it would have made and then it would have made that final fight between Michael and Laurie feel that much more organic. Because again, we're supposed to believe that this Laurie who has been playing Betty Crocker for 4 years I liked that we finally got a showdown between Michael and Laurie, and we actually got to see her finally take him out. but it came on the back of a movie that had given us no build-up.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? Point. We've had so many final showdowns with Michael and Laurie, and obviously the original film is a touchstone, and we've had, you know, some pretty good ones since then, but that's the whole thing, is that this movie, it's saying it's the end of a trilogy. It's kind of calling itself Halloween Ends, so it has to give us one hell of a final showdown, and it just doesn't deliver. No. Also, just a small point on that scene. I'm pretty sure the line she gives to Michael, well, it's not Michael, it turns out to be Corey, but that's another way the trailer tricked me, because I thought the trailer definitely gives you the impression it's her and Michael. But I guess that's just them being a bit too clever. But anyway, it's like, I'm sure they changed the line in the actual film, because I'm sure she says something like F you or something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in the trailer she's like, it's Happy Halloween, Michael, or I'm ready for you, Michael, or something. It definitely gives you the impression that it's Michael behind the door, because they must have done some voiceovers just for the trailer to kind of mislead us.
Yeah, and okay, that's interesting, because it then makes you wonder if they've changed things around at some point, if gone in a different, which might explain a lot. But yeah, I'm pretty sure in the trailer it makes it perfectly clear that, I mean, at least she thinks it's Michael.
Yeah. And the annoying thing is the trailer has dialogue that definitely wasn't in the movie, because I remember trying to listen out for it. And again, which makes sense. In the trailer, there's a line where Laurie's talking about maybe the only way he can die is if I die too. And I remember thinking that is such a cool concept, because that is kind of what they were building towards in 2018 and in Kills. You know, 2018 was very much about showing how Laurie has taken on some of Michael's characteristics in order to like take him on. You know, she vanishes, she appears behind him, things like that. So they play with that. Then Halloween Kills was very much about like Michael's childhood and like what's he staring at, what's that motivation. So they were building this really nice kind of idea of symmetry between Michael and Laurie, and then they just threw it all out the window, and there was nothing in this movie. And we talked earlier about like how this
I just want to make it clear that's your opinion. Like,
well, that's my
I think
opinion.
Halloween Kills sucks as well, and you're not as high on it as the first film. But
oh no, definitely not.
You have issues with it, but still you like it more than me.
Just another installment in the franchise, it would still be a bad movie. Like, I actually don't think this was a good movie even on its own. Like, I've seen some reviewers say if this wasn't the final chapter, it would be a good movie. I'm like, no, I think it would be a bad movie no matter what. Yeah. But sorry, disagree with me or disagree with the idea that it was a good movie?
No, I just
just not a good movie.
It wouldn't be as bad, because obviously that's part of our complaint. And I think what's sort of funny in all this is I could see how, if you're a casual fan, and if you're not maybe as invested as we are in this franchise, I could actually see maybe how you might just enjoy the movie on its own. Because, you know, when I went to see it, and there were people at the back to me, like I was the furthest one forward, and they were at the back, like a group of people. And so when Laurie did that really crass, terrible joke, and, you know, to Alison, like they actually did laugh. And I think, I wonder if that's part of the thing where they're just going to have like an entertaining time at the movies. And I mean, obviously I am as well, but I've got more of this stuff invested. And so I wondered if that's part of the thing here, where one of the big problems, one of probably the worst problem of the film, is the
work is the final chapter of a trilogy, just at all. You're frozen, and you're frozen. The picture that you're frozen on, it looks like you have like demon eyes. This is really creepy. Please unfreeze, Keith. Feel like a final chapter in a trilogy. You know, it really should have touched on points that were brought up in both 2018 and in Kills. It should have followed like some of the themes and things that were laid out in there, except it didn't. And the thing is, the final fight between Michael and Laurie, I actually quite enjoyed. I thought it was a decent showdown. I liked the way she
Not
actually
bad.
him. It was not bad. I liked
Solid.
I liked that it was a bit more up close and personal. You know, the end of 2018, they trapped him, he was done, and it would have been, look, I still think that they should have just done 2018 and left it at that, even though I do enjoy Kills. It's definitely an inferior movie to 2018, and I think 2018 would have been just a nice, solid movie just by itself. But I did like that the fight between Michael and Laurie in this one was a bit more intimate, that they did get a little bit close. I liked that the final blow was to slash his throat and then open up his wrist. I thought that, you know, was good. And I have to say, I really loved the scene where they were driving his body through town on top of the car to show everyone. I actually thought that was great. And then I liked that we saw Julian. I thought that was
This is our
cool.
one disagreement.
Okay. And then I liked that they disposed of his body. But I felt that ending.
Who's Julian again? Remind me.
The kid from the first movie, the one who's being babied and tying up loose ends. I mean, Julian is someone who saw his babysitter get attacked. I mean, if the town's going to come together at the end, we have to show some faces to show that some people are getting that closure, you know.
Trilogy of movies. And the first movie's guilty of it as well. Not as much as the next two, but it is still a little bit at times. But part of the problem with, and this is my problem with the opening of Kills, even though I respect what they did visually, because they did a really good job of making it look like authentically 1970s back to the original. I hate pretty much everything that they actually do in that scene, just because they're shoehorning everything in. They're giving answers to questions that never needed answers. They're like, because that's part of my whole problem with them returning to Halloween night 1978. My problem with it is that movie already had the perfect ending. That's sort of what's great about that ending is how ambiguous it is and the power of that. It's great because it's one last gut punch where Michael actually does escape. Like, they assume they've killed him, and there's that moment of relief, followed by that moment of terror where they turn around. He survived and he's on the loose again. But also the ambiguity of that, because the menace of him still being out there, but at the same time, we don't know what happens next. And that's part of the power of it. He might just go on to another town and start terrorizing. He might do something different. I mean, obviously, part of the problems with some of the sequels and the shoehorning in of stuff. And I mean, part of the problem of like them making him Laurie's sister out of nowhere, or like foster sister, like stepsister, is this idea that really Michael Myers, once he's left Haddonfield on that night, be about Laurie. So not the sheriff, but one who Laurie has a thing with now.
Hawkins.
It's stuff like that where we'd already gotten enough of his character in the original movie. And I think he's in the second one, isn't he? A little bit, because he... No, I mean the second original movie, because isn't he like Annie's father, or is that someone else?
No, that's a different character. Okay,
Hawkins,
I don't think is in the original movie. They just brought him in for 2018, and then they shot the flashback scenes for Kills, which incorporated him into the original storyline.
Okay, so that my point still stands, because it's stuff like that I sort of hate, where they have to tie everything. And I know it's not everything, but it's a lot back. I mean, I don't know where I got Billy from. Tommy Jarvis. But and I just think it's smug. I think it's too like nodding and winking to the fans. And I think that's part of my problem with the way they approach this trilogy of movies, where by the time you get to Kills, and I mean, in this, it's sort of less because they've obviously gone in this other direction, which we both hate. But I mean, you know, with kills, some of the flashbacks, and then even later in the actual modern stuff is just nostalgia overkills. It's just everything has to be tied into something from the original movie, and it doesn't. You can do a back to basics Halloween movie and just update it with modern sort of themes, modern type characters. And that's fine. That's all you need to do. It lives and dies on what we've been talking about, the quality of whether it's a good Michael Myers, whether we get good kills. In this case, whether we have a good Laurie Strode.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Allison has been built up a bit and then destroyed by this final movie, but I think tied up. I don't really like that in TV. A lot of my favourite TV shows get a good balance of tying things up to a satisfying extent, but also leaving enough open for us to imagine and speculate.
No, and
to me, that's good storytelling.
I do agree to a certain extent, but I also think that when it comes to things like sequels and reboots and stuff, they are stuck in a very hard place of how much do they bring back to make sure the original fans come back versus how much new stuff do they put in to bring a new audience in. And I think that it does come back down to personal preference. I obviously enjoy nostalgia a bit more than you do, but I also do think that sometimes this kind of stuff can add to a story. I think that bringing certain characters back, not always. I don't love the addition of Tommy in Halloween Kills. I think he is one of the weaker aspects of that movie and one of the parts that I don't really like, especially because I don't like Anthony Michael Hall's portrayal of him at all. So I just don't.
Well, let's not put that, because he is a good actor, but
he's a good actor. But
maybe he was just wrong for the role.
I think it's just wrong for the role. So, like, bringing Tommy back, I think maybe is leaning too much on nostalgia, because we didn't need to see Tommy Doyle again. 100% blame Anthony Michael Hall, but Tommy as an addition, no. But
it was bad portrayal.
But I think things like what they did in this movie, like, I mean, Julian coming back, it was literally just one shot of him. So all it really was showing that people who have been affected by Michael are seeing that he is gone. And I thought that was a good touch, because I thought that, like, that, again, that kind of brings closure to the trilogy. We're seeing some of Michael's victims get their closure and see that he is actually dead. And I think, like, sometimes, when it comes to nostalgia, I think there is a fine line between going too far and relying too much on nostalgia and just using
which
it
at times they've done in this trilogy. See, not always, I agree, but at times they have.
I'm not 100% with you, because I do like the 1978 stuff in Halloween Kills, and for me, I think that it does add a bit to the movie and to the story of Haddonfield, and to the idea that Michael hasn't just been haunting Laurie, he's been haunting the whole town. But I do understand why it might be too much for some people, but I don't have a huge issue with nostalgia, at least not to the degree that you do seem to.
Well, it's how it's done. I think at some point you have to move on with these things, and you have to just say it's possible to make a back to basics Halloween movie, but just to update some of the references, some of the characters.
Well, I feel they did that with 2018.
Mostly, I mean, I to a degree, I mean, I have issues with that movie more than you do, but it's a solid movie, I mean, it's sort of funny looking how bad things got than that, probably, in the end. But it's a solid movie. Like, I don't think it's the home run you do. Like, to me, H2O is still the best sequel, but it's not. Nah, H2O is better than 20.
Yeah, but it has such a dirty
It doesn't
Michael.
have as many problems as 2018.
It's a little boring in places, and it's got a derpy Michael. Like, okay.
We disagree a little bit. Yeah. You think it's a home run. I don't think it is a home run. I think it's not the best sequel. I can't get on board with that. But there's definitely things they get right. They sort of get enough right for me to say it's at least a solid back to basics sort of Halloween style movie. But this is what I'm saying. I think there's just certain expectations that we have as Halloween fans, because I'm not someone who's hung up on these things and saying, well, I want it to be. I mean, it's never going to be exactly like it is in 78 and stuff like that, because films do go through changes over the course of time and different era. But then that's probably part of my problem is as well, is they're trying to recapture 78 too much and trying to recapture that feel and that stuff here and there and nods to it. And obviously, if you're bringing back Laurie, and then it makes sense to reference it up to a point, but you should reference it through her type thing. You shouldn't go totally overblown. Everything has to be about, because part of my point is forgetting about the fact that we disagree on that opening of Kills is the trouble is at some point or the other in this trilogy they've brought back so many characters from the original film. I don't remember that.
How do you not remember Julian? He's like one of the best things about that movie.
No, he is actually.
Yeah, so you see him. Yeah, that's who I'm talking about.
Oh, him. Okay,
yeah.
that makes sense. Okay,
yeah,
I don't.
That's what I was saying. It makes sense for him to be there at the end because he saw Vicky get murdered. And he basically, he was victim.
That's. No, that's fine. I can forgive that because that's within this trilogy. So it actually makes sense. That's not. Sorry, I was assuming you were talking because they have.
No. I wasn't talking all the way back then. Well. No, old couple, and you hated that scene because the old guy was all like, "There's a guy in the bathroom wearing a monster mask." Do you remember those two? The black lady with her airplane and her husband in Halloween Kills?
I've only seen it once.
Okay, so they were Laurie's neighbors. Now, it turns out the black lady, she survived. So there's a scene in this one where Laurie comes out of the supermarket and this black lady's like, "Oh, you're smiling? Are you having a good day? Well, my mother over here."
I remember that scene.
So you see her as well at the end. And again, I like that kind of like that you get to see these victims of Michael from this trilogy, see him die and see his body. And where I was going with it, that's right. I was saying, so I like the last 15 minutes. I think that final fight is good. And I think that them seeing Michael go through the town is good. However, like I said, it doesn't belong on this movie because there's no build up to it. Absolutely none. So what I think they actually would have been better off doing is take the stupid mob storyline out of Halloween Kills. Okay, and instead go with the original ending, which was going to be Laurie picking up a knife and leaving the hospital, and then you go to this scene where she goes and confronts Michael, and therefore you just have the two movies, 2018 and Halloween Kills, and they end like that. We don't need this third movie. It's completely useless, and that final scene could have just been tacked onto the ends of Kills, and then we could have just taken out the stupid mob storyline, and we would have had a nice little duo, as opposed to this piece of crap.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I think I've heard other people make that point as well.
It was just a really weak ending. I think it was a weak movie, and I just think that really did all the characters dirty.
Okay, so because there's a couple more, so the Laurie Michael fight, it's all right. I'm not as creative because I just think this director can't really do suspense properly.
Oh yeah, no suspense.
No. But it's an alright scene. Yeah, it's decent. It's a little bit of a mess because again we're jumping about and like again I think just a basic thing you can just fix is just come up with a better reason to have Alison come in.
Yeah.
Because I agree she should be there, but that was a bit telegraphed just because it was pretty obvious that she was going to have a change of heart and turn around.
Yeah.
But no, it was all right. It was decent enough as like this final sort of fight, but obviously it felt underwhelming for the reason we said. So one other question, and I think I know your answer because of what you've said about nostalgia in these films, but did you like the touch of the knitting needle, or did you roll your eyes?
Because the needle.
That's obviously a callback, to the first movie.
I had a little chuckle when it happened. I didn't go, "Oh my god, that's so cool," or I didn't think, "Oh my god, it's so crap." I just kind of had a little chuckle, like, "Oh, okay, that's a nice little callback." Like I thought it was cute. What I didn't like though, because I didn't think they fit with this movie, were all the little flashbacks to 1978. because I just didn't see the point. Again, if this movie was focusing on Laurie and focusing on Michael, then I think the flashbacks would have been appropriate, but it wasn't. So it was like they just threw them in at the end to just be like, hey, remember, this is the end of this movie. Like, this is and it just felt stupid.
I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other. I mean, it's a decent enough nod. It is a little bit, winking and nodding a bit, but I'm hung up about that sort of. I know some people, neither here or there. It's sort of all right. It works, but it's not. I don't have strong feelings either way. So, I mean, the end scene, no, I didn't like, because like so much in this movie, it's OTT. They're just going overboard with we're making a big statement, and again, it's just contrived, because I saw another thing online today with someone actually asking the question of how did they actually manage to round up this many people in the town in such quick order to actually get this stuff together. I mean, maybe they made an announcement, but no, it's far-fetched, and they got this. And I'm not saying it doesn't work for the message and it doesn't work for the visual, but no, I thought it was over the top. I thought it was silly. Like, it just felt like they were trying too hard to put an exclamation point on the whole thing. And I just thought, like, Laurie, just melodramatic and over the top again, like them stuffing him into the thing, and just how ramped up it was. Again, if it was a better directed movie and stuff, and if there was a little bit more subtlety to this stuff, then I probably could have enjoyed it. But and then I sort of agree a little bit about the end scene, and I just think there's a little bit of a smugness to, they're almost trying to say, this is the definitive Halloween experience. This is like the definitive Halloween, and we've fixed all the problems of the sequels. Halloween Ends Part 5 or 6 review. Bloody hell, this is taking longer to end than the actual movie, or the trilogy. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so I was just talking about them slapping themselves on the back a little too much by trying to make the statement about this is the end, this is the definitive end, we fixed all the problems of the thing. It obviously comes up with the blue end, which is a little bit too cheesy on the nose.
But it was.
That's obviously what they're going for, but I just was making the point that even with 2018, not everybody's in love with that movie the way you are. And I mean, at the time, I enjoyed it a fair bit, and it's gone down a little bit because I've sort of seen some of the problems with it. But no, I mean, even I had a pretty good time and still have a pretty good time with it. So it's at least a decent movie. But I think that's just part of the problems with the arrogance, is this assumption that every Halloween fan is sort of on board with this, things to discuss. So you guys are really getting your values worth today. But I just want to, like, did you, like, in general, because we said we weren't that keen on the kills, that like it took too long to really get to any of them, and when they did come, mostly they were pretty lame. Obviously, you quite enjoyed the Laurie stuff at the end. The other kills in the movies, did you enjoy any of the kills outside of that stuff?
See, the thing is, I don't think I did. I'm trying to remember them. No. And in all honesty, none of them really... I think the DJ's death was probably the best one, because that one was pretty full on. And then, the whole bit where he cut his tongue off, that was kind of funny.
CGI tongue, But it was actually in a bad taste sort of way, and because he was a total arsehole, it's one you could enjoy, because you sort of thought, because I really felt bad for that girl from the bully gang who ended up
Yes.
being brutally killed. Because she didn't deserve it. She was actually the one in the group who was like trying to stand up for him.
Yeah, and see, the thing with that scene is I think at least 2 of the kills took place like off screen. We only saw the aftermath. So again, I didn't think any of the kills until Laurie actually killed Michael. I didn't think any of the kills were really anything stand out, you know? I mean, even Halloween Kills, for all its like all of its issues, has some really fun kills, and of course obviously 2018 has got some fun ones too, but there was not, I mean, every kill in this was just kind of underwhelming, you know? The homeless man was kind of an accident, and then the cop was like the tag team scene, and the doctor and the nurse was crap because it was I don't think there were any kills I liked except for Laurie's final kill of Michael and maybe the DJ. What about you?
I'm the same. I think out of the other stuff, the DJ one was maybe the one which I thought was just because he was a douche and it was like the visual of it. And I did quite, just as a gag, like his tongue going round on the. I got a chuckle. I did actually chuckle at that, even though I could tell it was a CGI tongue. And it's obviously not a great kill, but that's the one from the rest and stands out as least being sort of decent. If you give this one, what would you give Halloween Ends out of 10?
I hate to do this because I love this franchise and I love this revival, but I don't think I can go any higher than like maybe 3 out of 10. And I'm only really giving it that because I like those final 15 minutes and probably because it's still a Halloween film. But like, I don't think the film was well made. I don't think it was well paced. I don't think it was well acted. There was no tension in this scene. I meant to mention that during our review. There was nothing scary about this movie. Nothing tense. Nothing, you know, like the previous 2 movies at least have tense scenes.
That's a big
problem. Huge problem in Halloween, and it didn't have that sense of voyeurism, you know, that like Halloween films have, and it didn't have anything that felt like the spirit of Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis is still solid. She wasn't given much to work with, but what she was given to work with, I thought she did her best. She did her best, and
same
like I said,
Allison.
Yeah, same with Allison. And like I said, I did like the final 15 minutes. I just think they belong in a different film. But other than that, no, I can't. So I might even go with 2 generous. I will go with 3 out of 10 for this one. What about you?
No, that makes sense. And I think people who know me and my thoughts on kills, then my score makes sense. So as a big step down for you from kills, your score makes sense. But I'm committed. I only gave Kills a 3, and I think this is even worse. It's a little bit of a toss-up, but for the reasons I said earlier, I think it's even worse. So I have to give it 2. I can't go lower because obviously we've seen worse. Yeah. And like you said, some of the acting is at least good and decent, and they do their best with a real dog of a script and a real dog of like some bad directing, and there are bad acting from certain other people. I don't think the actor playing Corey is very good.
No.
I mean, who knows? In a different film, I mean, maybe if, because as we said, he does sort of look like a convincing psychopath, but this wasn't the movie. They didn't really portray it well enough for that to really comes across and be convincing. But so who knows? I mean, in a better film, maybe the actor is better, but I thought he came across as a charisma-free zone.
Me too.
He was really boring to watch, the character and the actor.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, I only gave Kills a 3, and I think this is even worse. And this is obviously more of a crushing disappointment for me, because same as you, because it is the end of the trilogy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about Kills, a bit in the middle, that's a bit all over the place. 3 out of 10 from you, a 2 out of 10 from me. And as I said, that does track because here it's a big departure from Kills, which obviously you weren't in love with as much as that, but you know, it tracks, and it tracks for me because I only gave Kills a 3, and I dislike this one even more, so it has to be about a 2. The comments will be interesting because I know this film does have its defenders, so we do welcome.
Weirdly, it does, which I find interesting.
It's less divisive than Kills. I would say it's less.
Yes, people do
a
seem
favourite because
Yeah.
even people who love Kills, I think, are some of them have turned on this one and are giving it. But obviously, it does have it. I have seen a variety of opinions, so that's interesting. So we obviously welcome yours. This question is about Jamie Lee Curtis. Do you actually think this is the end for her as Laurie Strode, or do you think she will return in a future Halloween film?
I feel like this might be the end for her. She's talking about it like it is the end. Like a lot of the interviews I've seen, she's talking like she is actually saying goodbye to this character. And I do think at a certain point, you have to leave these types of characters behind.
Sense.
You can't stay. It's like Neve Campbell not coming back for the next Scream. You know, at some point, Sidney Prescott has to rest. Same with Laurie Strode. At some point, she has to rest. At some point, that has to be it. And not to sound harsh or any kind of ominous dooms, but Jamie Lee Curtis is in her 70s. If the next Halloween movie is made in, say, 20 years' time, she may not have the option of being around anymore. So
you know what?
Yeah.
I'll check this later. I'm not going to check, but I think you might have bumped her up a decade. I'm pretty sure she's only in her 60s.
Okay, sorry, Jamie.
About
my
64,
bad.
yeah.
Okay, so that was
She'll
bad.
be coming for you with an axe.
Yes, she will. I'll have to check around the corners. But no, from everything she's said and the way she's been speaking about the character and the sadness that she's showing as she speaks, I think that this is it. And the thing is, I think if you did revive Halloween, we need a new Final Girl because it would need to be an almost complete reboot after this one. So I personally do think that this is Laurie's swan song, which is a little sad because it's not the best way for her to go out. But yeah, I think this will be it for her. What about you? Do you think she'll come back?
I would agree. I think there's a small chance she will because I'm pretty sure she is like 64, 60. So I mean, obviously, in theory, she's still got plenty of mileage in her. So she could still maybe in a future movie have a cameo or something like that. But because to her, the draw of this was then it's, at least in that first film anyway, it's a more feminist Halloween. It's just... because obviously it was already a pretty feminist story for the time, but that was the twist that appealed on her, the fact that they're giving the character an opportunity to reclaim a narrative which is kind of dominated by a man. As far as she's concerned, this is it for Laurie Strode. But one thing I'll say about her, and it's something I love about her, and it's something I love about classic Scream queens, fair play to her. She's given it the old, you know, she's putting herself out there again. You can see the passion and that is something I love about these Scream Queen type actresses, where they're just, because obviously there's still a stigma and snobbery sometimes about with certain actors or just towards the horror genre, where sometimes they're happy to do it early in their career because it's like a paycheck or they're getting something on the CV. But when they become bigger names, they don't always want to return and do it.
That's correct. They like to forget their paths and forget like previous roles and stuff.
So fair play to Jamie Lee Curtis promoting these movies, because she's been giving it her all, and regardless of what we think about the movies, she's really passionate about it. It's something Jennifer Tilly has, where she's just so enthusiastic, and I mean, who knew that Tiffany would still be a part of the Chucky universe these many years later? But it's just something that rubs fans up the right way. They can see that she's having such a blast and embracing it, and there's certain other example. I think about that with Barbara Crampton, you know, because obviously she got her big break in Reanimator in the 80s, and ever since then she hasn't been ashamed to appear in more horror movies, more genre movies. Festival, she's always very friendly, enthusiastic, and I mean that's an example right there, because she's been in a lot of great movies anyway, but there have been because she's been in so many horror movies, there have been some turkeys with her as well, but the enthusiasm is always there. So that's something we should celebrate with Jamie Lee Curtis.
I agree.
And
Definitely.
the way she's promoted these movies and put herself out there. So, okay. I agree with you. Like, I could maybe see a cameo in the future, but as far as the leading role goes, I think it would take even more to talk her to come back. There, and I saw this Halloween movie has the lowest box office of the three so far, and it doesn't surprise me. So the question is, because the reactions were very mixed on Halloween Kills, as we've already said. So, do you think there was some damage done by Halloween Kills where, because a lot of people weren't keen on it, I think critics in general probably slated it. Some of the fans were more on board with it, but there were obviously divides there. So do you think, because this sometimes happens with like franchises, trilogies, whatever you want to say, where if you have like an installment which is seen as like a bad movie, divides people, and there's at least a good half of the fan base who maybe don't like it, then it can then damage the next film's box office.
Oh,
do you think that's happened here, or
I
do you
think it probably has a little, especially considering the extreme negative reaction towards Halloween Kills, because as far as I can remember, and it's been a few years now, but I'm pretty sure that Halloween 2018 was very well received by critics and by audiences. And I think that we all got really excited after that one to see Kills. And I think that Kills was actually a little bit of a disappointment, to the point where maybe it did make some people turn off the franchise with regards to this one. I couldn't say how much it affected it, but I would say that, yeah, I would agree that Kills probably did affect this one a little bit.
The critics were mixed on 2018. I have seen both ends, and I think maybe with that it could partly be a horror thing where some of the traditional horror critics actually enjoyed it quite a lot, and it was maybe other critics who maybe aren't such big horror fans who didn't. But no, I mean, certainly the reaction was more favourable than with Kills. Probably with fans as well, I would hazard a guess. But no, I think you're right. I think it is partly some of the hatred towards Kills. And I think another factor might be less positivity for this film than there was for Kills. So it's sort of gone down even. Like the early buzz I hear from fans, and obviously there are some who are saying they like it and defend it. So fair enough if that's your opinion. But yeah, I think it has gone the other way more. It's less 50-50, and I think there's more on the negative side. So it's sort of tipped that balance. So I think that might have, like the early reviews, some of the early buzz not being as good.
I was going to say, I think it's a combo of like maybe some waning enthusiasm after Kills, and then the early reviews saying, you know, this is a change up, this is different, go in prepared for something. Because I remember before I went to see it, a few of the YouTubers that I follow, I didn't watch any reviews, but even just from their thumbnails, I could tell that something very different was going to go down in this movie. And so I actually went into it really nervous, because I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what they've done. I don't know. Yeah. So I think it was probably a combination of those two factors that have contributed to it being a lower box office draw.
Yeah, because I'm going to keep an eye on the box office, because it's still a decent box office. Like, I think it has it at about 40 million worldwide. Nowadays, with a movie like that, where they spend quite a bit on marketing, it has to double its box office. So that's the key thing, where, like, technically speaking, it's already made its box office back once, because I think it's only 20 million budget.
Yeah.
But there's a possibility they might not double it because of the negative reaction, and because a lot of times a movie like this is going to do its best business in its first week because people want to see it. Like, I mean, there's people like me, even though I was sort of dreading it because I didn't like kills, I was still going to go opening day. It's just something I do as a horror fan, but it's, but I can see it maybe struggling. I think next week is going to be crucial. If it can keep a decent momentum next week, then it could kind of end up still being a success. But I think if the negativity hurts it too much and people are less likely to, because obviously things like people going a second time can play into this as well, because there's a possibility then people who really like 2018 might have gone a second time. And I could see that happening because that's something horror fans and movie fans in general sometimes do if they really love a movie. And the same with Halloween Kills, because that obviously has some strong supporters. I think it's unlikely so many people might go for a repeat sort of screening. I think if it has a good second week, it can still kind of double its box office. But if the negativity sticks to it too much and it has a bit of a lackluster second week, then I think it could be a little bit of an upset. We do bring it back, and I think we're agreed that this isn't the end because it's too big a franchise for them to ultimately let die. Do you think Alison should come back and become the new Laurie? And also, do you have any ideas about what direction that movie should take?
See, the thing is, I think if Halloween comes back, it's going to have to be a completely new reboot because they killed Michael in this one in such a way that I don't think you can bring him back now. That being said, when we were watching the scene where his body was going into the crusher, Stephen leans over to me and he's like, "Oh, he's going to be pissed when he crawls out of there." So
Well, they've found so many stupid ways, haven't they?
I know. I think if they are going to revive Halloween, it needs to be completely new. I think I don't think it should be like a continuation of this because they ended Michael so finally in this one. Like it wasn't just like we're gonna shoot him off a crater so that he can fall down a ravine and get nursed back to life by some dude like he did in Halloween 6. This is like we sliced his throat open, we sliced his wrist open, and then we put him in something that literally crushed his body. So if they ever do bring Halloween back, they're either going to have to do what they did with Halloween 2018 and make it a completely new continuity so that Michael can be alive again, or they're going to have to do a completely new reboot like they've done with Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, which I honestly don't know how that would work because, they haven't been well received. The reason that these monsters are so iconic is because they're the originals. So, I honestly don't know where Halloween's going to go from here on out, but I think this is final. I don't think anyone from this particular trilogy should come back. I think that's done and dusted. Alison might not have gotten a great ending, but she got an ending, and Michael did as well.
Wow.
So,
well, you mean apart from Michael, but like the thing with him is they would maybe have to recast it because it's a similar thing where maybe a bit like Jamie Lee Curtis, this feels like a last go around for Nick Castle. And
it really does.
It sort of surprised me because I'd forgotten that he wasn't the main Michael in this film.
No.
Because I just took for read that he was. Yeah, because obviously 2018 they used two actors, didn't they? But it was him for most of the film.
Yeah, so 2018, when you see him at the institution, that's Nick Castle.
That's him. Yeah.
So that opening scene is. I think mostly when you see him with the mask, he's played by a body double. But I think Nick is there to play him for a few shots. I know that there is one kill that is Nick's. I don't know which one it is, but I remember him talking about how there is
Okay.
one kill that is his, and then the rest, yeah, because obviously Nick Castle is also getting on in years, so
Yeah.
you do need a slightly stronger stuntman to do the to do
Mhm.
some of the hardest scenes. But this does feel like Castle's last hurrah as well. Like he came back to send the character off, and then that's that.
The
What's your train of thinking? Would you want
well,
a continuation or?
I mean, the mind does boggle because
Yeah.
if they rebooted it again and did a different timeline,
Mm.
I think that's at least the fourth different timeline at
Yeah,
this
yeah,
point, is
it's break the
at
Halloween
least.
series. We're going to like
But
Twilight Zone type timelines here.
Alison back, and I think she can be a good final girl,
Mm.
and that could be just a little touch, and you link it back to like these movies and like the original, just because she's like, as long as like Laurie's, and I know this sounds mean, but I think now it's legitimately move on from that stuff, at least
Yeah.
for the time being. Because let's face it, you're not really going to bring Jamie Lee Curtis back for just one scene anyway. So you need a clean break. But I mean, if you brought Alison back, you could at least reference the fact that she's Laurie's daughter. Not, I keep saying daughter, but granddaughter.
It's all right. I know what you mean,
Yeah, I feel bad for Judy Greer. She
Yeah,
got a bit
I have
screwed
to
over.
say, I was, until they released the trailer that had the voiceover saying he killed my daughter, I was secretly hoping that
Hoping not.
maybe
I
Karen
remember you
survived.
saying.
Like,
Yeah.
well, because Hawkins survived, and he got pretty beat up. So I was like, come
Exactly.
on, maybe Karen can survive. But no, I think if they wanted to bring Alison back in a continuation, they could do something similar to, of all the shows I'm referencing right now, Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, which basically creates a new villain and a new like A that's based very similarly on the original series, and then
Okay.
has a couple of characters from the original series pop up. So it's like it is a new continuity, it is a new villain, but because these characters have experienced this type of villain before, they come in to help. So maybe it could be something like that, like a new shape, or someone who's like Michael Myers and Alison comes in to tell her story of like her own boogeyman or her own shape or something like that.
Make it Michael Myers, but someone else plays him, in which case we need, obviously, the casting to be really good. But we both agree, for similar reasons as how we feel about Laurie, then that probably needs to happen. You need a bit of a let's move on, get a younger actor type thing. So, or if you don't do that, you need to invent a new killer, but do a Halloween style film, which in some ways still works as a Halloween style movie, but just sort of update it. So obviously do a better job of the cock up they did with the execution in this film.
He's the Michael Myers you get at the boot sale on a Sunday afternoon. He's not the real thing.
Now, I think for logistics reason, it won't happen anyway with Alison and the actress, because I think when you have a change, it's a bit like when a new manager takes over like a sports club or something. Typically, they like to bring their own people in, and obviously we don't really know how far down the line we're talking. I mean, my guess is we're talking a few years down the line at least before someone picks it up.
I'd say a good 5-10 years before someone like circles back around.
Batman type scenario where there was, maybe for now they've run out of steam, but because there was like almost a 10-year gap between Nolan rebooting that and like the disasters that were, the Joel Schumacher Batman film. So that's a similar example.
I think also with Halloween, it's going to depend as well on the state of movies and the state of horror movies and where we are as far as our media goes. Like, for example, right now, and probably for the last 5-10 years or so, at least 5 years, we have been living in an era of nostalgia. We've been living in an era of reboots and remakes and like, everyone just seems to be longing for the good old days. So I think this was the perfect time to revive a horror series that was rooted in nostalgia.
Sure.
So it'll depend how that landscape goes for the next 10 years and where the horror landscape goes for the next 10 years. Slashers, they tend to circle around and horror is like, I mean, movies are like fashion, genres go in and out of fashion, themes go in and out. And like I said, because we are right now living in such a nostalgic time, you know, Stranger Things and even the new It and like all of the, you know, the movies, they're all connected to something. So we are right at that right time to have like a Halloween revival, but we'll have to see where we are in 10 years time and see what the landscape is like.
Duffer Brothers, if you ever listen to this, what you started, as great as Stranger Things is or can be, and as really much fun as we've had, enjoyed it, it's your fault, Duffers. You started all this. You've created a monster, a beast, something a little bit different. I think they could actually return to the idea of an anthology Halloween series.
I was thinking that just before. Yes.
Yeah. Because that way you eliminate some of the problems of like tying it back to these movies and then movies further back, and maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, 8 years, however long it's going to be, like you said, it could be a very different landscape. In fact, it's most likely to be a very different landscape. And at that point, maybe the nostalgia thing would have run its course to a point. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe fans might not be so excited. So, I mean, actually, that could be a good way of doing it, where even if it's a bad movie, it's probably not going to hurt the franchise that much, and it's probably not going to piss fans off. Like we've talked before, obviously part of the problem with Season of the Witch is that it was just the wrong sort of placement. It's like, in a way, if they started the franchise off with that movie, it wouldn't have mattered in a way so much how good it did at the box office, or how well it worked as a film. Not so much because it didn't have that Halloween name attached to it from the previous two. So
plus nothing about witches. I mean, come on, man.
That's funny.
You can't name your movie Season of the Witch and then have no witches.
It's tenuous, but that's funny, because I mean, learning more about you and your taste is you absolutely dig everything with witches. So that's funny. They've just run their course for the time being anyway, and then so maybe an anthology, a one-off story, and then if that does well enough, come back with another one-off story. Maybe that's a good way to go for a couple of movies, see how it sort of pans out. Because it is a trilogy, and because the point of a trilogy is then it has to work as an overall story over 3 films. That's one of the crucial differences between sequels and between something that is a continuing story over, Back to the Future is clearly a continuing story over 3 films. Like those films, like 1 and 2 literally ends by saying to be continued, and they end on cliffhangers, which this film has done, and how bad we both agree this film is. Does it mar some of the good work done, especially by 2018 for you? Is that going to ruin that film in the future a little bit for you?
No, I don't think so. Look, it's not a great ending to a trilogy. If I were to sit down and watch all 3 movies together, it would. But what will probably happen with me is I will end up pretending that Halloween 2018 is its own movie, Kills is just a bad sequel, or at least a sequel that I can enjoy, and then this one doesn't just exist. Look, it won't ruin my enjoyment of the movies. I think it does ruin a little bit the way I view this whole entire reboot of the Halloween franchise, because, when 2018 came out, I was so enthusiastic. It hit almost all the right buttons for me, and I was really enthusiastic. And then Kills came along, and Kills was a little bit worse and made me go, okay, you're kind of stumbling around a bit. And then this one came out. So from a critical point of view, and if I was coming from a purely like a critic's point of view, yes, absolutely, this does mar the first 2. But from my just a pure enjoyment point of view, and me personally, no, it won't ruin the movie for me. I will go back and watch 2018 and still still think it's a great movie, and I'll just pretend this was a bad bit of fan fiction, but accidentally made its way onto the screen.
And generally, it's quite a bit of fun. It's solid, but it's because that's something I like. Crucially, even in the first one, even though there are good horror moments, and to a certain extent, up to a point, I agree with you about its good things. I never really found the first one scary. I enjoyed some of the feminist stuff, and I think I enjoyed it just on the level of a fun Halloween style film, a good, Saturday night, whatever, at the cinema. And obviously, like you, I got enthusiastic in the run up to it and then watching it, because it just felt to me a bit like when Twin Peaks came back, unexpectedly, even more unexpectedly, really, all these years later. And, for the next, 6 months, a year, whatever, in the run up to Twin Peaks, and then in the fallout from Twin Peaks, David Lynch just became this massive name again, and I just couldn't get enough of the stuff because I'm so invested in that whole universe. And then that stuff happened, and I'm happy then Carpenter got involved somehow. And that's another thing, actually, just a quick point. Another thing I didn't like about Ends is I thought the music was the weakest of any of the music.
It wasn't great, was it?
No,
not fantastic. In fact,
not one of their best.
Yeah, like any moments in the film where I actually thought the score worked, and I can't really think of anything. So
the theme was like a half-hearted redoing of the original, and I actually hated the CGI pumpkin they had on the screen.
I know! What was that? I was watching
stupid.
it and I was like, this is like watching like the Muppets or something, with the whole, the mouth opening and then the more pumpkins coming through. I much preferred the flaming pumpkins from Halloween Kills. But this was just like, that was weird and odd.
For the Reaper, which fine, I'll give them that, because it's from the original film. It's a song, you're tying it together, so that doesn't bother me. I always enjoy. It's a good song. I enjoy listening to that song. I think the first movie's solid. There's enough I like about it, which makes it at least a decent to good movie, with some flaws that definitely drag it down. But overall, I think it's still a solid movie. Kills, I absolutely dislike. I can't get on board with your defense of it personally, but we've covered that. So once again, my experiences going into this compared with Kills, what was different, because Kills, because I like the idea behind Kills, the mob idea. I just thought they totally effed it up, basically. But it's but because I didn't like Kills, I was coming into this one with a downer. And I because I thought, well, at least they're gonna do Laurie versus Michael and end things off on it. Yeah, you would think. I sort of thought that maybe partly by default it might be a little bit better. I even said that on another video, but no, I think
all around.
Yeah, we both agree on that. Then this is even worse than Kills. Just not as into these movies as you, so it's not really fair for me to say this, because this is the end point of them. It's a real lame end and a real bummer of an end, because they definitely could have turned it around, and if this had been even a half decent movie, they at least could have ended the Laurie Michael stuff on a high, and they could have at least have made it at least a decent trilogy. About Kills, people who were down on Kills like me, that they did actually say that, then you need to see now how it ends, basically. You need to see
we did, didn't we? And
we really did.
I think because, and I said this before in the review, because Halloween 2018 is such a standalone movie, it really can work just by itself. If you just watch that movie, you get I mean, a decent amount of closure. You get an arc for Laurie, you get Michael trapped at the end, you get, the feminist message of the 3 Strode women rising up and taking him down. They really could have just left it at that. I think the problem is when you watch Kills, because Kills ends on a cliffhanger. Kills does not, you can't just watch Kills as a movie on its own. It is clearly part of a trilogy. Whereas if you just picked up Halloween 2018 without knowing it was part of a trilogy, you could just think that it was its own movie. And I think that's why I can still enjoy it. At the very least, I will still enjoy the first one. Kills, I'll probably end up watching now and being like, well, this isn't going anywhere. I'll get to the end and be like, well, we all know how this went. But I think because 2018 has such a definitive ending, I can still enjoy it.
2018, they actually snuck Michael at the end of the credits, like him being still. Do you think they did that as a backup in case the film didn't do very well?
I've always wondered, because they say that this was planned as a trilogy, right? They keep saying that they were always going to do that. I actually wondered that. I wonder. No, it was like, we're going to make this first movie. We're going to make it as a movie that can stand on its own, and we're going to hope that we can turn it into a trilogy, because it doesn't seem very well thought out. It just doesn't. When you look at the 3 movies, they don't connect that well, and they don't flow that well. I mean, I still think that 2018 does flow into Kills better than Kills flows into Ends, like much better. But all 3 of them, no, they don't flow. It feels like they're covering their asses, by saying this was always a planned trilogy. No, I think we wanted to bring Halloween back. We got Jamie on board. We got Nick on board. We got John back. We're going to do this, and we're going to hope that it's good enough to make a trilogy out of. And then we're going to pretend that we always planned it. But I don't think they did.
Because 2018 was such a runaway success and everything else. And yeah, there's certain things involved where they were probably able to talk, like Jamie Lee returning again. And and I think that is some of the issue with some of this nostalgia stuff, is that maybe because they need to try and, in their own minds, continue it on and make a trilogy out of it, then that is why they're sort of pulling some of this stuff out of the air. So, update our rankings. So where does this slot in?
So my rankings, go
on, just trying
to. So my rankings, if anyone wants to watch our ranking video, it's actually on my channel, so you can go over there and watch it. My rankings stay almost the same. This one just slots in. So I'm just having a look at my rankings. So last on my list was Season of the Witch. I'm still going to leave it at last, not because I think it's a bad movie, but because it's not my type of movie. Like, it's just not at all. And I explained this in our list video. It's science fiction. It's not horror. And I'm not a science fiction fan. And I went into the movie not knowing it was going to be science fiction. So it just wasn't my type of movie.
Well, bits of it are horror. Well, bits of it,
fair, but it was definitely more science fiction horror than supernatural horror. So
okay.
So that one stays. But again, that is, and we spoke about this, I think, off camera. We were saying if I rewatched it, knowing now what to expect, it might be better. So I might rewatch it one day. I mean, I do own the whole series, so that one's still at the bottom. Okay. My second last one. So the next one from bottom up was Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. I am still leaving that there because that movie is a shit show.
It's a really bad movie.
It is a really bad movie. Like, just so bad. And everything about number 6 is just truly terrible. But I'm going to slot Halloween Ends in after that because I don't think I can
bottom 3 sounds
bottom 3 right. So bottom 3 for me. And just to give you a quick refresher of the rest of mine, so this again, remember guys, this is going from least to most favorite. So after Halloween Ends at number so that would be number, I'm trying to work backwards. That's all right. Bottom 3, I've got Halloween 2 because I find that one really boring. After that is Halloween Resurrection, which is really bad, but also kind of fun in a bad way. You know, you at least have Busta Rhymes doing his stuff. Yeah, guilty pleasure. After that, I've got Halloween 4, The Revenge of Michael Myers, another one, but I just find really dull. I know this is one that we disagree on because I know that you really like this one. But there's something about this
video
one
was so funny because we did 4 and 5 on the same video and we had polar opposites.
Yes, we did.
That was funny.
So I find that one quite boring. Then I've got Halloween by Zombie, so the first Halloween zombie film. Obviously there's big issues with that. But I do enjoy Michael in the zombie films because he's such a fucking beast, man. Oh, he is just like,
I don't enjoy Michael.
And I like Danielle Harris. And I like Brad Dourif. So I think that's where Halloween. Now I said this in the video. I'm like, Keith wants to smack me in the face for this one, but I actually rank Halloween 2 by Zombie higher than Halloween. And I think it's because, like, one of my issues with Zombie's Halloween is that he tried to be Zombie, but he also tried to be John Carpenter, and it just didn't work because they're such two completely different styles. Whereas in Halloween 2, he was just Zombie. He's just like, nah, man, I'm just going to do my zombie thing and turn Michael Myers into Grizzly Adams and make Loomis an asshole, and I'm just going to be Rob Zombie. And I'm like, you know what, dude? I respect that. Might be a crap movie, but I respect you doing your thing. So that's what Halloween 5 quite high, because I genuinely enjoyed Halloween 5.
Yeah, I remember.
Guilty pleasure. Yeah, and I do think some of the direction is not too bad. And again, you've got little Danielle Harris as well, and there are some fun kills. You've got the barnyard kill, which or the barn kill that we love with the pitchfork, and there's a few others that we really like. Yep. So we're at top 4 now, pretty much. So Halloween Kills for me is number 4 because, well, as we've talked about in this, I actually really love Halloween Kills. I think it's fun. I think Michael is really fun in it. The mob scene is crap. I will gladly admit that the mob scene, just everything to do with the mob
is that 4 for you?
Yeah, that's number 4 for me.
Still way too high.
Number 3 is Halloween H2O, which I do love. H2O, it's one of the movies that came out. Yeah, it's part of my favorite horror movie era. I do love the post-Scream feel that it's got. I think Laurie's characterization in it is good. I like her chemistry with Josh Hartnett, but it has one of the derpiest Michaels you will ever come across in this series, and I don't find him scary at all. There is not a single scene in this movie that scares me. So that's why I can't rank it higher. Number 2 is Halloween 2018, which, as we've talked about, I absolutely love. I only have a few minor complaints about that one. The Loomis knockoff, oh God, Dr. Sartain. I'm so happy when Michael stomps on his head. Just one of the best kills ever. And then, of course, the original is my absolute favorite because you can't beat it. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. Such a great film. One of my favorite horror films of all time. So that's my ranking. So so this one has ended up in my bottom 3 because it's just so bad.
To you before we started recording what feels like 8 hours ago now, I actually couldn't quite remember my order, so this one might be a little bit different, but this is roughly how I feel and where I am. No surprise then, I am a little bit different from you. Number 13, it is Halloween 2, as in the Rob Zombie Halloween film.
Yeah, I know, you hate that one.
and I do actually have a good line about this. I was rewatching Bride of Chucky yesterday. By the way, commentary now up on Patreon. $1 a month, you get Bride of Chucky commentary. Come on, people. But they actually play a Rob Zombie song at the start of that movie over the credits. And that terrible career idea. So it's just a footnote that his song in that is perfectly fine and works for the film, and that should have been the level of his involvement in horror. Because Rob, you never should have got involved in horror, mate. You never should have remade Halloween. And this is a good example of it being a bad idea for fans to remake movies that they loved growing up, because a lot of times it ends in disaster like these two movies. And you said Keith is maybe going to hate me for having 2 as high as, but when it comes to compared with his first remake, I can't really fault you for having 2 above that, because it is really just a toss-up. My reasoning for it being bottom, it's not surprisingly the 2 zombie films are bottom 2, because they are the worst of the franchise. Absolutely bottom of the basement, where I can't really get any enjoyment out of pretty much anything in them. They're a real insult, in a similar way to as this is a real insult end, but it's just a personal choice. Personally, I think Halloween 2, the 2009 one, found new ways to piss me off in ways that, because at least with the remake of the first one, you can sort of say he at least stuck to pretty much the same story, roughly. It's just that he did it in such a bad way, and he made every character a piece of shit and a Rob Zombie style character, which is not what Halloween should be. You should have characters you like. You should have characters you root for, because it creates stakes. He clearly doesn't understand that. Like, deciding which is the less smelly part of the toilet. Well, I'm saying it, Rachel. That's not even my line. I got it off someone else, but it's a good thing to apply to.
Imagine you out here sniffing toilets.
No. 2 of the worst films ever made, and it's for a similar reason as those Star Wars prequels, which for some reason you find ways to defend, are 3 of the worst movies ever made.
We should have a conversation about that one day.
We will one day. We'll get there. But the reason they're 3 of the worst movies ever made is because there's a budget behind them, because there's good money put into them, because there's talent involved. And when you have that level of talent, when you have that much of a budget, the movie should have turned out a hell of a lot better than they did. And that's part of the difference with some of the Halloween sequels, is when it's more low budget, when it's a bit more of a trashy, amateurish style movie, you're judging it in a different way. Movies with an actual budget behind them, like a big studio, and yeah. So for that and some of the other reasons, 2 of the worst movies ever made. A terrible calling card for Rob Zombie. And it's just a toss-up. So 13 for me is 2. 12 is the remake. So then 11, and this is nice symmetry, it is End. I agree, that's where it belongs, bottom 3. So yeah, for me, nothing could be quite as bad as the zombie films, but this comes pretty close.
Well, if you want me and Keith to do a zombie retrospective.
Oh, fuck me. Well, hate me for this, but screw you, Rachel, because number 10 is Halloween Kills. That's where it belongs. That's
all I have to say to you.
it's a terrible train wreck of a movie. I think the kills are rubbish. No, because it's an action movie. Those kills feel like action movie kills. They don't feel like... Say, I disagree, then we get a good Michael Myers in Halloween Kills. 9, Halloween Resurrection.
Yeah, fair enough.
Roughly, it's pretty boring to watch. Obviously, you've got a terrible way for Laurie to be, at the time, written out of the franchise. You also have the stupid excuse for why Michael is still alive. I mean, that's up there for the worst excuse.
Was really dumb.
Yeah, the kills are pretty weak, and in general, it's just a little bit of a boring movie to watch. Like you said in the review, it does feel like a classic early 2000s movie with the whole
definitely
reality, but damn it, if Busta Rhymes doesn't save it a little bit and keeps it out of my bottom 4, because some of the dumb shit with him is actually entertaining, so does save it a little bit. Number 8 is Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers.
Oh yeah, that was second last on my list.
Okay,
but you hate the zombie films a lot more than I do.
A lot
so
more
that's
than
why,
I
yeah.
do. So that explains.
But yeah, number 6 is terrible. It's truly
It's
terrible.
it's a mess. Like Paul Rudd, who we both like a lot, he was really miscast in it, and
he was.
And a lot of mediocre stuff, but just a mess of a film. And the whole cult thing was just such a bad idea and didn't work. Yeah. There were one or two moments I enjoyed. I did actually, just a guilty pleasure moment out of that batshit insane scene in the surgery room where we're not.
Oh,
sparks flying. We weren't quite sure who was killing who and why.
Yeah.
So that might be the highlight of the film, but overall it was a bit of a dog of a movie. So we're sort of in agreement with that one. 7 is Halloween 5, Revenge of Michael Myers, and overall I think actually there's good stuff in that. I do agree with the barn kill. There's some decent enough kills. For me it was a frustrating one just because I enjoyed 4 quite a lot, and it sort of pissed me off that they didn't really build on the promise of 4, because obviously Danielle Harris was wasted. They sort of reduced her role, and they had a perfectly good final girl from the previous film, Rachel, and they killed her. Yeah, Rachel. They killed. I agree. Killed her off pretty much straight away. So, no, overall, I thought that was. I'd say mediocre. It's obviously not terrible the way some of the sequels are, but 3 are where I've got a bit of a decision to make about my plate. So 6, 5, and 4 are the 3 entries I have the hardest place in. Will be 2 though for many people, but at the moment, because we weren't so keen on it when we did it for the review, number 6 is the original 2. Yeah, 1981. A weird one because Carpenter didn't want to do it and they talked him back into doing a script, and basically he decided to get drunk most of the time. So the last sort of 20 minutes, 25 are good, and I think it would have been a better film if most of the film was in the hospital, because I actually think that's where the film excels, and you could have done a couple of scenes in the town. Like, I think it's fitting to have some Loomis in there, and that's of course the film where he starts going even more Dirty Harry and rogue. So we definitely enjoyed some of that stuff. But yeah, no, on a rewatch, I was a bit more middling on it than I had been. So that's why it's number 6. So number 5, screw the haters. Number 5 is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Damn it, I meant to do the song. Must be the season of the witch. Must be the season.
See, why don't they use that song? Why isn't the movie about witches?
Because it's a great song and it's a great title.
I thought you were going to do the jingle. Happy, happy Halloween.
Oh yeah, of course. How could I forget that? Happy, happy Halloween. That was genius. I won't say much about it because it's just it's a movie that's a cult sort of oddity and gem to me and tickles my fancy. And I just enjoy more as a guilty pleasure. Plus the mask kill with the family and all the insects is absolutely brilliant.
I agree. That is a really good, really scary, intense,
we both agree. We both enjoyed the ending with the shut it off. Shut it off!
With old Tom Selleck hamming it up. Turn it off!
The medical Magnum PI.
Yes.
So, okay, so Season of the Witch is 5, so I've switched them around, those 2. So 4, which actually isn't that far from where you would have it, but 4 is Halloween 2018.
Yeah, I can be happy with that. Top 4 is good.
Yeah, because obviously I've soured on it a little bit. Like, I've seen some more of the problems on the second go around. So, as I said, those 3 were the hardest to really place. But I think overall it gets more right than it gets wrong and is a decent back to basics sort of reboot, if you like, reboot slash sequel. I enjoyed having Laurie back, and I enjoyed a lot of the stuff with her and the family. So for the return of Michael Myers, it is my number 3. I thought they did a really good job of rebooting the franchise at this point. Personally, I thought it was a good, strong Michael Myers in it. I sort of like the reason they created for him getting the mask back. I thought that scene was well handled. Got some fun Loomis, like some of the hammy stuff with the religious guy was really funny.
Yeah, I forgot about the crazy preacher dude drink driving as he rolls along.
And that's so good. I stuck that at the end of that review. But yeah, and obviously this has come up on another video, but one of my favourite kills is the one with the shotgun.
The shotgun, I remember that, yeah.
And obviously the ending, we both agree, is really good. And that's why I'm a bit down on 5, because they sort of blew that.
Yeah,
but
they did.
Yeah. Really good ending with the gut punch. So 2 and 1, you know, 2 is
just add water.
Yeah, you covered it, but I mean, I like it more just because it is more of a clean-cut type film that sets out to do something, and it achieves it without a lot of like mucking about and fuss. So that's what separates it from like that in 2018. And I think, as someone else said on a different sort of show, you can just enjoy it as a product of its time. Balance between being nostalgic for the original and sort of bringing Laurie back in a successful way. Because obviously they do a good job in that opening bit of like working Loomis into it without going too far. So there's a couple of bits that are sort of doing that nostalgic type thing. But after you have that thing with Loomis, apart from maybe the odd sort of flashback in Laurie's head, it actually does feel like its own movie. And it's a good Halloween film, but it's a good Halloween film which fits its time period. And that's a crucial thing. I mean, I probably agree with you that it's not particularly scary. Maybe the odd moment is scary, but it probably doesn't matter, because for what it's trying to achieve, it achieves it. It's a good mix of horror comedy. The LL Cool J character is one of my favourite characters in the whole franchise. I agree.
Yeah,
he's an absolute gem of a character.
Writing his romance novel.
Good cast. I agree with you about the chemistry with Jamie Lee and Hartnett. Michelle Williams is in there, obviously an early role for her. She's very good. So it's a good cast, pretty solid cast down the line. So yeah, it without really ever gonna challenge, you know, the original. But as far as I'm concerned, it is still the best sequel. So I'm gonna stick by that. And my number 1, I'm not really going to talk about it because we've waxed lyrical so many times, but I agree with you. The original Halloween is one of the greatest horror movies ever, and maybe one of the best movies ever, you know, because it is just a 10 out of 10 masterpiece.
It really is.
And you can find our review up on the channel anyway, so it's quite a long review, so you can... It's a pretty good detailed review of why we love the movie so much, and why we both think it's like not a modern, but a classic of cinema, and why it still holds up now more than 40 years later, which obviously you can't say about a lot of films. Still a masterpiece. Like, every time I put that movie on, I don't get bored of it in any way. I just watch it. It's obviously quite a short film anyway, but like everything it does is pretty much perfection.
It's a masterclass in building tension. I mean, you don't see films build tension the same way they do in that original. Just so well done and so seamless, and just everything about it is so good. So yeah, definitely check out the movie if you haven't seen it, and then go have a look at our review, because we definitely get into it.
It's another Halloween movie, wherever it is, whenever it is, assuming we're still around and still doing this podcast, we will cover that movie and we will rank it. We will add it to our rankings, which obviously might change over time because that's the way these things.
Realize he's wrong. I mean, it's a possibility. You can follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. As I mentioned earlier, if you do want to check out Keith and my earlier rankings of the Halloween Halloween movies, I have that on my channel. We go through every single movie and explain our reasons. My Twitter and my Tumblr accounts are also linked through my YouTube channel, and Keith usually puts a link in the description, so come and follow me everywhere.
Thanks, guys, for watching.